Hello there and welcome once again to the latest edition of 31 on the 31st or 31 on 31, however you wish to phrase it. For those who know, this is something we've done every year for, I can't even remember how long now. It's got to be, 7 years, 6-7 years we've been doing this? I don't know. We've done a lot. By we, of course, I do mean myself, Cody Leach, Sean Chandler, Wiliscredia and Rudy over at GenEX Reviews. The idea is we take 31 movies. Traditionally they have been from franchises, but we've branched out based on themes, various things like that. 31 movies that we rank from worst to best. The theme of this year's 31 on 31 is the new breed. That is the new breed of horror director. Now, I'm sure many people will jump in the comments and say, where's this guy? Where's this girl? Where's this director who's made an awesome film? It's like, we get it. Look, there's going to be some that have been left off here. We try to make them relevant to now. So most of the people that are on this list have had a film out fairly recently, within the last year or so. So, there's many factors that go into our choices, not to mention the fact that there are 5 of us trying to bang our heads together to come up with those choices. So, undoubtedly, there will be someone left off the list that upsets people, but nothing is meant by it. Now, just before I get into my ranking of this year's 31, I did just want to make an announcement in this video that this will indeed be my last October 31, that is. I may be back for others, but I will no longer be doing the October 31 on 31. I have multiple reasons for that, and if people really want to know them, I may do a separate video explaining them. But yeah, all you need to know is that it has nothing to do with any of the other guys that I do this with. In fact, the only reason I have continued to do the October 31 on 31 for as long as I have is because of those guys. Because I love them and I love doing things with them. Yes, even CP. I love those guys. They're my friends, and I will be happy to join them on many a thing over the course of the future. But for personal reasons, after this year's 31 on 31, I am stepping away. Revel in that, if you will, or mourn if you'd rather. Hopefully there will be more mourners than revelers, but who knows. Anyway, down to the 31 movies from modern horror directors. Let's go.
Guys.
Number 31. Terrifier is a film that I absolutely cannot stand. I think it's a wretched piece of crap that just literally has nothing to offer. It's a horrible character doing horrible things to people that aren't really characters either. There's literally no background, no story with any of these people. They show up and then Art the Clown shows up and does nasty things to them, and it's that for 90 minutes essentially. It looks cheap because it is cheap, it's cheaply made, but I will, I'll give director Damien Leone some credit. It is cheap and therefore it looks cheap, but it doesn't look anywhere near as cheap as what it actually is. So, props to them on that front. But beyond that, it is a detestable piece of trash. Number 30. Terrifier 2 does not fare that much better than its predecessor, quite frankly. The only thing here that saves it from being right at the bottom is that there is more story, there is a lot more work done with the characters, and there is a bigger budget, which means they are able to do a bit more with locations, set design, production design, that kind of thing. But it's essentially more of the same, and the story and characters that they do build up here just go nowhere. They're building up this mythology that I will admit is actually quite intriguing for some of the film's running time. It all just disappears up its own ass where nothing makes sense, and the mythology that seemed to be going somewhere actually goes nowhere. Number 29. Raw gets 2 stars only because of the technical skill with which it has been made. If I was grading this purely on enjoyment level, it's a half star for me. Everything about Raw is designed to shock, repulse, infuriate and disorientate. Well, it succeeded. The film is a continuously grotesque reel of vomit-inducing nastiness. It revels in finding all the ways one can manage to put the sickest thoughts in one's clearly fractured psyche onto the screen. For what purpose, God only knows. It's a graduate film student's wet dream. They'll try to convince you that it's super edgy and that you just don't get it, but it's just filth masquerading as art. It suggests a dozen different themes that it could explore, but never actually bothers to explore any of them in any great depth. Number 28. The Black Coat's Daughter has some interesting themes, interesting ideas. Unfortunately, they're just not that interesting while you're watching the film because the film is so dull. For the first half, at any rate, this thing drags, really drags. We're following these 3 separate women and their stories, and the film does this kind of like non-linear editing thing, like Nolan does, where you go back and then you see things from a different angle, from a different side, and it's supposed to illuminate us more about what's going on, and it's just so slow and dull. I don't care. As with a lot of these modern horror movies, it's that typical thing where we're gonna go into something evil, something demonic, quite frankly, and then we're going to let that demonic force win. We're going to let that demonic force triumph at the end. And it's supposed to be like, oh, shocking that it wins at the end. But like so many horror films do this nowadays that I just expect it. It's not surprising anymore. And therefore, it's not scary. As a result, I'm just like, oh, it's eye-rolling. That's what it is. I get to the end and I just roll my eyes because I'm like, yep, figured they would go there. Number 27. Terrifier 3 is more of the same. The only reason it gets higher than the other two, it is better film than the other two. That's primarily because of the higher production values. This has a much bigger budget than the previous 2 films, thanks to the success of those films. And I think because of that, it does look better. The cinematography is better. They're able to put more things in the frame with regards to production design and things like that. This just isn't my bag. I do not like this kind of horror film. I like slashers, but I like the kills to be quick. I like the build up to the kills to be tense filled, to be a bit of a roller coaster, and then when the kills happen, done, dusted, over and done with. But this just languishes in them. Like, there's no tension in the run up to the kill because Art the Clown seems to just capture people pretty quickly. And then it's all in just, spending 5-10 minutes just watching him torture these people. I have too much empathy for people, even made up characters for a movie, to warrant sitting there enjoying, if that's the right word, this level of violence. Number 26. Midsummer for me is a film that I was quite looking forward to. I thought Ari Aster did an amazing job on Hereditary. This was what he did next, and for me personally, and I know I'm in the minority here, it just didn't work as well as many people seem to suggest it does. I didn't get the tone of this. I can't tell if they're trying to be funny or what, but most of the film takes place in daylight. Horror for me does not work in daylight. It's just not scary. I find a lot of the characters annoying, except for the central character played by Pugh. I don't like these kind of Wicker Man type horror stories. You know, these, let's go and see a cult, and you know, they're all dressed in the nice white kind of uniforms and doing all this weird religious shenanigans that I find it mostly boring. I think that the running time for a film like this was astronomically large. It was like 2.5 hours, and I think there's like a 3-hour director's cut you can watch. I was quite bored for the 2.5 hour cut. I wouldn't want to sit there and watch another half hour of this. I just felt it was a little bit pretentious, makes all its points far too laboriously. I think it could have got there a lot quicker. This should have been like 1 hour and 40 minutes, but yeah, this is what we got. And again, it's another one of those films where, hey, evil stuff's going on and evil wins.
Number 25.
Longlegs is a film that, you know, I went into after hearing a lot of hype. I did like the trailer. I was looking forward to it. Again, evil wins at the end. Sorry if that's a spoiler, but it's just, you should kind of expect that going into any kind of spiritual horror film these days. Apparently, the devil's got all the best kind of moves, whatever. That's if you go off Hollywood. But yeah, the whole film, it's not as clever as it would like to think. People do things that normal people in real life wouldn't do. They behave in ways that, you know, any rational person wouldn't, because they'd be too scared to do some of the things that they're doing. It's just like, no, have some common sense. Don't go into that place alone. Don't make that decision. Don't make that turn. Don't go in that room with that person. It's silly at times, and it's one of those films where if you say you don't like it and it's just not all that clever, people just say, well, you just didn't get it. Well, okay, I didn't get it then, I guess.
Number 24.
Smile is one of those films that is kind of funny for the wrong reasons. Like, I watched this with a friend, and the two of us, I mean, we could have just been in a giddy mood, but we just found ourselves laughing at so many of the things that were going on. I'm not entirely sure that was meant to be the case. As for the story itself, it does have some creepy ideas, some creepy visuals. I think it's effectively directed, but it feels like such a knockoff of It Follows, a film that, well, quite frankly, should have been on this list, was meant to be on this list until the release date for They Follow kind of got pushed and whatnot. But yeah, It Follows is a far superior film to this, but this rips off so many ideas from It Follows. I mean, the story is essentially the same. This demonic force that follows someone that only they can see, and it gets passed on in a kind of viral format, the way that I feel like I've seen it all before. The one note scare tactic of just someone smiling creepily is kind of played out by the halfway mark. And once again, yes, we have the ending in which we can't just let people have a happy ending and then bring the evil back in the sequel. No, we have to do it in a stinger at the end of the first film. Evil wins, nothing's put right, and everything that the characters have been through was all for naught, which kind of makes the whole journey feel pointless. It's a tired ending that plagues most of the films on this list, to be honest.
Number 23.
Thematically, Infinity Pool has a lot to say about the need for a pure sacrifice to wash away the sins of mankind. The old sacrificial system was never enough to redeem oneself. Therefore, under an inadequate system, mankind is destined to keep on spiralling down further into the depths of hell. That's all great commentary, but the constant bloody excesses of violence and hedonism wear extremely thin. None of it is in the least bit pleasant to watch, and while you might argue that that's how a film about a man's descent into hell should be, the fact remains it is very unpleasant to watch. I like cinema to challenge me, but the things in this film that are designed to shock feel like nothing more than that. Points could have been made without the need to thrust a load of body horror porn onto the audience.
Number 22.
Titan is yet another example of modern ideas being forced into the collective consciousness. Those ideas are, of course, that gender identity, something that does not actually exist, is fluid, and that such notions about oneself begin as a child, as demonstrated by the few opening scenes in which we see the child version of our central character already developing an unhealthy obsession with motor vehicles. It's this kind of obsession that would lead credence to your twisted John Moneys of this world. I'm sure he'd get a kick out of a woman pretending to be a man doing one of the things that only a woman can do, i.e. give birth, albeit said birth is the result of a sexual union with a machine and not a man. Yeah, if that all sounds a bit weird to you too, welcome to what I'm sure many would consider the gloriously boundary-pushing next step in the evolution of queer cinema. Essentially, what you get is Boys Don't Cry meets Christine meets Demon Seed, all wrapped up in a Cronenbergian-sized bow of body horror. So basically, not for me. A film should have something to say, and this does, so props for that, I guess. Unfortunately, it's just not anything I care to hear.
Number 21.
From a technical standpoint, I would personally say that Infinity Pool is a better film than Us, but from a rewatchability standpoint, despite all the things that I feel are wrong with Us, I would probably rewatch Us. Well, there's no probably about it. I would rewatch Us again over Infinity Pool. I don't really want to go back to Infinity Pool, but the lightness or the lighter tone, I wouldn't say it's a lightness in tone, but it does have a lighter tone about it, does Us. I think there are, some humorous moments in it that do work. I also think there are a lot of humorous moments in it that don't. I do think that the film really does hinge on Lupita Nyong'o's performances. I think she's great in the film. She's always great in everything she does. She's a fantastic actress. But when you get into the final act of this movie, it all falls apart. It doesn't make sense. And Peele is asking you to really stretch suspension of disbelief to beyond its breaking point, I would say. When you think about the logistics of what's going on underneath the town, like what has to happen for everything to really kind of take place the way it doesn't work. It's complete nonsense. I get the themes, thematically, it's rich, but as with most of Peele's work, the way in which he explores those themes is really heavy-handed, extremely heavy-handed here, and as I say, it all falls apart in that final act.
Number 20.
Maxine was one of my most anticipated movies of this year. I have reviewed it on my channel. It was a major disappointment. It's still a good film, don't get me wrong, but I feel like director Ty West is cramming way too much in here. He's trying to look at too many themes, too many things going on. You've got the oppression of women in Hollywood. You've got the notion of someone wanting to become a star above all else. And then you've got all this stuff added to the mix in the final act with the pushback by the far right, the religious right in the 80s against video nasties and things like that. It's just pick one, dude. Pick a theme and explore it. But here he's just trying to deal with way too much. And again, this is another film that falls apart in the final act with a twist reveal, a killer reveal that I saw coming a mile away right from the opening scene. So when it came, it just really wasn't that much of a surprise. The two films that preceded this were so much better. And yeah, that's what makes this a disappointment, really.
Number 19.
Love and guilt go hand in hand. One can be used to manipulate the other. Entirely remove one and you are free from the other. As with Infinity Pool, director Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor is a film that is thematically rich but emotionally vacant. The concept is a thrilling one, but once again, the needless brutality on show, coupled with mostly cold as ice characters, leaves me feeling battered, bruised, and unrewarded. It's just not a pleasant experience.
Number 18.
Dead Silence is the film that James Wan made directly after Saw. It is not quite as bad as its reputation might have you believe, but it's also not that great either. It's solid. It's solid. It's got some nice ideas in there. It's, puppets coming alive and coming after people is always a scary idea, especially if you execute it correctly. And I think for the most part, Wan does here. It's just that there's too many kind of weird twists that come later in the third act that don't really work, that kind of fall a bit flat. They seem a bit stupid. They're more funny than they are scary. And when those twists are revealed, Wan kind of resorts to the same tricks he pulled when making Saw. In fact, when the final twist is revealed, I almost expect the Saw music to kick in because it reverts to these flashbacks that show you how everything was really going on, in spite of the fact that the character couldn't really see it. The main character couldn't really see it. Just like they do with the Saw films, when you get to that end moment and they reveal a twist and we see all these flashbacks as to what Jigsaw was doing, and then that music ramps up. It's the exact same tactic played here. I like the antagonistic relationship between the central character and Donnie Wahlberg's character, and I like the fact that at the end of the film they do come to work together. So it's almost a shame that they off Donnie Wahlberg's character in the way that they do. Solid film, but not anything particularly special.
Number 17.
Nope is the third film from director-writer Jordan Peele, and as with his previous work, it does suffer once again from the concept kind of getting in the way. Once you get to the end, once you get to that third act and everything about the concept is really revealed, what he's going for, it just kind of falls apart again. It's just like, it's unsatisfying. I would say that it kind of stands up a bit better than like us in terms of the concept, but it's just, again, heavy-handed metaphor, the stuff with the monkey that for me personally doesn't really feed in all that well to the UFO stuff. I'm trying to cram this metaphor in with everything else, and it's just it's a bit messy, it's a bit irksome. I come out of the film thinking, right, okay, cool, it doesn't do a right lot for me. And as the science fiction guy, this is the one that should have been right up my street, but by the time I get into all the big huge let's try and bring down a UFO nonsense at the end, I'm kind of out. Cool performance from Daniel Kaluuya, who's a really good actor, but again, it's that third act syndrome. I'm intrigued in the first act. Second act kind of starts to lose me a bit as I'm figuring out where it's going, and by the third act, I'm just like, okay, this is a bit of a mess.
Number 16.
Never Let Go gets off to a really slow start, and for the first half of this film, I was kind of in the camp of, yeah, okay, not bad, but it's not really grabbing me. It's kind of slow, bit plodding in places, and it feels a little bit like a cross between many films I've seen before. But halfway through the film, something happens that's quite a shock moment. I didn't see it coming, I didn't expect it. And from that point on, the film is actually quite thrilling as we see these characters try and navigate their way through an endless onslaught by some demonic force. I think you get to the end of the film with a few questions left unanswered, a few elements where you think, oh, that seems like they've not really gone into that well enough. But for the most part, certainly the back end of the film is quite a thriller.
Number 15.
Sinister is an effective chiller from director Scott Derrickson. Chilling, it's quite creepy. It does a very good job of raising the hairs on the back of your neck. Ultimately, it is a family drama about learning to appreciate the things you have in your life that are of genuine value rather than seeking other things that are not so valuable, such as fame, riches, that kind of thing. I don't like the fact that we go on this journey with this character who learns these things, who does actually learn the lesson by the end of the film, and yet that lesson doesn't really matter at the end of the day because he can't stop this force from coming after him. And for me, that just leaves a bit of a sour taste in the mouth because, again, I've said this with many films on this list, you go through this journey with a character, you hope they're going to learn something, and when they do, and the evil still wins, it just kind of takes away any value in any of the things that they've learned. Because if stepping into the light doesn't stop the darkness, then it kind of makes stepping into the light a bit pointless.
Number 14.
Of all the films on this list, I would say Hereditary is probably in the running for being what I would call the best technically made. I think director Ari Aster knows how to use the camera, how to move it, when not to move it. So much dread and terror is brought out of this movie by just a still image. It's just, for me, again, it comes back to that problem that runs throughout many of these movies, which is giving the darkness, giving the devil far too much credit by letting him win the day. There was a case to be made here, and I did make it in a video essay I made over on my Movie Evangelist channel, which is that this is a family that has no faith in Christ, no faith in God. They've looked to dark arts, spiritual stuff, but they're not putting their faith in the right things, and because of that, evil takes a foothold and takes over their family. Even so, I just find the ending way too bleak, and there's just not enough hope. We get to see a lot about the darkness and nothing about its counterpart.
Number 13.
Abigail is a really fun, schlocky horror film from the director's Radio Silence. Like I say, I had a lot of fun with it. It kind of gave me what I was expecting. That's also kind of the downside to it, in that as I'm watching it, it didn't really offer that many surprises. I felt like most of the surprises were given away in the trailer, even down to Dan Stevens turning into a vampire. There's a bit in the trailer that kind of gave that away. But obviously the big conceit behind this is that the girl that they kidnap turns out to be a vampire. It's kind of what the whole trailer's built around, and I feel like the film itself takes so long to get to that moment that you're kind of waiting for the film to start. So in that regard, the trailer, in a way, spoilt the movie for me. But, as I say, I still had a ton of fun with it. I still like this bunch of characters, and once the poo hits the fan, so to speak, and they're fighting for their lives, it really does turn into a fun kind of who's going to survive, who's going to be the last man standing kind of horror film.
Number 12.
Smile 2 is a vast improvement over the first film. I feel like it paints on a much bigger canvas, obviously because it's got a much improved budget. I think the central performance from the lead actress is quite staggering. I think she gives, quite frankly, an awards-worthy performance. Not that she'll get any awards, because this kind of movie doesn't get awards. But even so, I think she really pulls you in. It's a great tale about the fame monster, about how being famous is not all it's cracked up to be. Everybody wants a piece of you. And yes, while this has been done many times before in other movies, I just felt like this did a very good job of making you feel all the things that someone in that position might feel. The ending is very predictable, especially given where you expect horror movies to go these days, as I've mentioned so many times on this list. But of all of the movies on here with bleak endings that kind of piss me off, I was really gripped more by everything that came before it than I was compared to the other films that are below this.
Number 11.
Get Out is the film that really kind of put Jordan Peele on the map as a filmmaker. Obviously, he'd had a long comedy career before this, so people didn't really see this coming. The fact that it's a politically charged horror film, the comedy elements in this, when they try to put gags in there, it feels shoehorned. It just doesn't really fit the tone of the rest of the movie. But Daniel Kaluuya, who gives the central performance here, does give an amazing performance, and all the actors across the board, to be honest, are pretty good. Bradley Whitford, of the comedic side of things, he offers some good stuff here, but that's because he's Bradley Whitford and he's very good at doing that. I think Peele proves himself as a director. It's a great effort for a first time out, but it's not quite the absolute golden classic that people made it out to be when it first came out. I think it is a little bit overrated. I think people really kind of sung its praises to the nth degree when it came out, to the to the point where I kind of pushed back against it. But now that time has passed and all that's died down, I can look at this with fresh eyes and think, you know what? It's a solid horror film with really good performances, some nice social commentary, a really good 4-star movie.
Number 10.
Took me a while to get around to seeing James Wan's *Malignant*, but when I did, I highly enjoyed it, just because it's nuts. It basically throws everything in there, including the kitchen sink. It's just like, you know what, we're going to go crazy. We're just going to make a weird-ass horror film that just puts a lot of wacky ideas in there, and we're just going to go with it. Despite how ridiculous, how ludicrous the concept actually is, we're just going to go with it. The thing about that concept is, because I have seen the X-Files, there is an episode of that show called Humbug, which kind of gave away the ending to this film, to be honest. I feel like there's more of an influence to that episode in here, although this does take a more serious tack on it. Having that lodged in my brain, I don't know if it was just because of that. I saw the twist to this film coming a mile away. But like I say, that doesn't make it any less enjoyable. And again, that's because Wan and co just embrace the ludicrous nature of the story and really lean into it. And because of that, you get a really fun ride.
Number 9.
Ouija Origin of Evil is one of those rare films that takes a original movie that wasn't really all that great, wasn't considered to be great by fans, horror fans, and actually turns it into something worth watching, something that's got that edge. And that's mostly down to director Mike Flanagan, who really knows what he's doing when it comes to horror. He knows how to send a chill down your spine by the way he frames things, by the way he sets things up. He also does a really good job of making you actually care about the characters. So this is a prequel to the first film, and prequels are generally not that great an idea, to be honest, but in this case he does a wonderful job of making it about something. This is a family dealing with the dark arts, so to speak, trying to contact the dead or pretending to at any rate, and then actually finding a way to seemingly do that. But obviously this is a thing that you shouldn't mess with. That's essentially the message behind the film. Don't play with things you don't understand. If you think you can control what's on the other side, you can't. You're going to get a nasty surprise when you try. I can support the message behind that, and like I say, because Flanagan's in the director's chair, he really knows how to get the scares. So yeah, really solid horror film.
Number 8.
X is the first film in director Ty West's trilogy of films about the two characters, Pearl and Maxine. This one follows a crew of young people trying to make a porn movie on the cheap, on the fly, thinking it's going to take them to fame and riches and goodness knows what. But it really delves into the moral implications of porn itself. There's one particular sequence in the centre of the movie that kind of puts it on trial, really. These characters start to discuss whether or not porn is a valid form of art, and the answers that come out of that based on certain reactions, based on certain behaviours, is quite telling, I would say, as to whether or not it should be considered a valid form of art. Obviously, my answer is that it shouldn't, and I think this film goes some way to proving why it shouldn't be. But yeah, it's an interesting film in that regard. It's a bloody film. It's quite brutal. Like I say, it's because of that centrepiece sequence, I think it does have some interesting stuff to say, but it's also really good in the icky kind of scare factor type thing of putting these people on a farm in a location that's quite isolated, going up against essentially two geriatric nut jobs.
Number 7.
Oculus is a really great supernatural thriller that follows two different timelines as they run alongside each other to tell this story, this family drama about a spiritual entity that is attacking this household. Now, I think for a while the film does a pretty good job of keeping the mystery as to whether or not this really is a supernatural entity or just something that is in this family's head, a shared madness, if you will. I think the film could have done more with that to kind of keep you hanging, keep you guessing. Is this all just in their head? Is this a mental illness or actually a supernatural thing? But I think it's made pretty clear fairly early on that actually it is a supernatural entity. And once we get that, I think director Mike Flanagan really goes to town with it in producing scares, chills, making the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. Flanagan's one of those directors who, rather than using jump scares, he kind of shows you everything that is unfolding. And when something is happening, it's actually happening. And therefore, it creates a sense of dread, a sense of terror within you that anything could happen. You never feel like any of the scares are just cheap thrills, are cop-outs. It's a very effective chiller and proof positive that Flanagan is one of the best directors working in horror today.
Number 6.
Crawl is a really great alligators attack movie, of which obviously there are many. Crocodiles, alligators, that kind of thing. You think Rogue, you think Lake Placid, think Crocodile 1 and 2. Yeah, it's a whole genre, but I have to say, I think personally, this is the best film in that genre. It's got a 2.9 on Letterboxd, which I think is severely unfair, severely underrated, ridiculous score, quite frankly, but it's a very tightly paced film. It's quite short, doesn't overstay its welcome. Few characters, caught in a hurricane, really struggling with a bunch of alligators going up against them. Estranged father and daughter learning in the thick of it to, look out for each other once again. It's very simplistic, but very effective.
Number 5.
Ready or Not is another horror film from the directors Radio Silence, directors of Abigail. This shares a lot of similarities with Abigail in that it all takes place in an isolated location, a large house. There's a slight reversal here to Abigail in the sense that the victims in Abigail were a whole bunch of people going up against one vampire, whereas here it's kind of reversed and it's one woman going up against a whole host of, freaky family, basically, just absolute nuts, who put her through this test, put her through this game where they hunt her. They try and hunt her down and kill her as part of some kind of induction into the family when she marries their son. But it's very tense. It's also very funny. I think the humor here works. It's got a lot of commentary on class structure and whatnot, but I think it's more effective than Abigail because it sets out its stall much earlier on, so we get to the good stuff, we get to the fun stuff much sooner. So for me, better film, but just as fun, just as crazy, and just as bloody.
Number 4.
The Exorcism of Emily Rose, for me, is still Scott Derrickson's best film. I really love the courtroom nature of the story. I mean, that's essentially what it is. It's a courtroom drama, but with horror thrown into the mix and kind of based on a true story. Now, obviously, it's very Hollywoodized. I imagine the true story didn't really play out anywhere close to this, to be honest, but it still raises a lot of really great questions about evil and its place in the world. If demon possession could be proven to be true, then that raises a whole host of other things that need to be considered if that's the case. And that's essentially what the film and the true story did. They put that on trial. This notion, the defense was that it was demonic possession, when the prosecution was saying that actually this girl was not possessed. It was because of the priest's treatment of her case, missing the medical side of things, that led to her death. Now, the film never really comes down either way
as to what that is. It's based on testimony. So even the things we see that are demonic, they're testimony. We're not seeing them happen in real time. They're based on what people are telling us. So it's essentially up to you, the audience, to decide what these people have told us. Is it how they saw it, or is there other things at play, medical things, mental health issues? I love the way it plays out. I think Laura Linney is incredible in it. I think Tom Wilkinson's very good in it. And I think the girl who plays Emily Roll herself is absolutely fantastic. Some of the physical work she has to do here is just brilliant.
Number 3.
Alien Romulus is essentially a greatest hits of the whole Alien franchise by director Fede Alvarez. I think it only stumbles a couple of times. The most noticeable moment of that is when a famous quote from Aliens is used, which just feels totally out of place and forced in, shoehorned in. It doesn't work. It kind of made me cringe. But besides that, everything else is used really well. Yes, there's a lot of nods, there's a lot of winks to fans, but I feel like they're used within the context of the story that's been told here in a pretty organic way that makes it feel like it is part of this story, not just a callback. I also think they take certain elements of the movies that didn't work, stuff from like, say, Alien Resurrection, and revamp it here in such a way that it does work. All round, it's just a tense, gripping thriller in space, bringing back the xenomorphs in a way that I think we all kind of really like. Down, dirty, isolated, and scary.
Number 2.
Don't Breathe slightly sits above Alien Romulus for me, just because it's a bit more original. It's a fascinating idea, this notion that a blind man could be the villain, could be more terrifying than the crooks that break into his house. But ultimately this is a story about what happens when humanity rejects God. The central figure here of the blind man is someone who has experienced loss in his life, and as a result of that loss has abandoned any faith in God. And when you abandon faith in God, when you abandon the notion of God, it frees you up to literally do anything. And that's essentially what plays out here. This guy is willing to go to any depth of humanity because he has ceased to believe in God. On the flip side to that, we get this girl, the central character, who goes up against him, who actually shows us that in many ways she does have faith, and it is that faith that leads her out of this trap at the end. So on the surface, it is just a chiller that kind of keeps getting more tense by the minute, but underneath that surface, it does have a lot more going on.
And number 1.
Pearl is a really great horror film about, one, coming to terms with who you are, and in the case of the central character of this film, it just so happens that who she is a psychopath. Okay, but she still has to come to terms with that, and she does throughout the course of this movie. Another thing that this film is about is accepting your circumstances, being okay with them, embracing them to a large degree. And much of what this film is about is, once again, Pearl coming to terms or accepting the circumstances with which she is born because of who she is. This theme also plays out in the character of Pearl's mum, whose entire life has been shaped essentially by the husband that she married, who we never quite find out what happened to him, but as a result of whatever it is that did happen to him, he is now disabled and she is his full-time carer, and that has dictated the pattern of her entire life. But she's had to accept those circumstances, come to terms with them, and come to terms with the fact that she does have a psychopath as a daughter. All of this makes for a really great character study of both Pearl and her mother that is shot in really vibrant, vivid Technicolor, which adds a slightly different dimension to this kind of movie.
So there you go. That is my 31 on 31 for 2024, October 2024. As I say, I may be back in the future for your mid-year 31s where we do different tacks, things like action, comedy, that kind of thing. I will not be back next year for the October 31, but it's been a thing. It's definitely been a thing. I'm sure we will have a debrief in the near future after this, so do look out for that. I'm sure me and CP will entertain at various points, but yeah, do check out the other guys' 31 on 31 videos. As I say, that's Cody Leach, Chandler, Wiliscredia and GenEX Reviews. Check out their videos. Let them know what you thought of their choices and mine, and who's smoking crack, who takes the Lomax Award for this year. I wonder if that will continue after I'm gone. I don't know. But yeah, thank you for watching my 31 on 31, and thank you for joining me over the years in these every October, and yeah, nowhere else to go really, so just thanks for watching this video, and until next time, cracking.